Alrighty. Cool. Oops. Cleaning up some things on my end. 1 second. Should take more than just a minute. Alrighty. Okay, so hope everybody's doing well, doing all right. There we are. Get some music going. Just kind of have some background sounds going on as we jump into some I don't know. We'll see. So let's see. Nice. Okay. So yeah, gonna be going over a few things to kind of help trying to think. Yeah, kind of like clear up some of the ideas. Just kind of put some work in to the next round of campaign. Stuff like this probably needs a bit of clarification, so it is probably best that I at least have it somewhere that I can refer to. You know, save the VOD, you know, whatever it is, kind of at least have that information either to share in the future or, yeah, in any case. So I'm gonna be going over a few concepts of some styles of play that trying to think. Some styles of play that are not common in the modern era of tabletop game, right? At least not. Yeah, I would say they're probably not common, right? They're common within a certain group or a certain crowd of players, but most modern players definitely do not fit into that crowd. So it is definitely a new, or I don't know, new to the community for sure. But it is going to take a bit of getting used to in the community. The concepts here aren't new, but yeah, so just a good place to kind of provide this clarification as needed. Seeing as how this is a switch to an older edition, there are some changes in regards to that. I'm not going to go over those changes just yet. I think those would probably be best served in like play stuff, you know, where people are able to actually interact with it, you know, get a feel for the game itself directly, rather than like, you know, going through like, you know, these are what the rules say. Pretty, I would say, at least, I don't know. I'm not sure that most people can comprehend the way something plays or feels how it plays just by strictly reading the rule set for it, right? I think you need some time with the system and to kind of understand how that goes. So probably won't go into that. Rather just kind of keep this stream to the more overarching ideas that are going to come into play. So to start out here, as you can see already, it says patron and faction play. So I don't know if I need to clarify what a faction is. I think that's pretty well understood within, you know, even modern kind of like D&D community. So I don't know if that concept is completely unknown. But just to kind of give it something, right? You know, it's a small organized group, either within a larger group or part of a larger organization, or is the the group, that share a common goal, right? This could be anything, right? So it could be, the faction of Danaan cheesemakers, right? Or the faction of I don't know, right? The faction of Tor Akarn, right? However that works, right? So the way faction membership works could be public, could be secretive. There's no, so yeah, I would say that for the next round of campaigns, at least, as we kind of switch into this a bit older style of play, factions are actually going to be an extremely important part of the gameplay itself. It's going to be important if you're allied or if you're, considered an enemy to factions. This is going to have a lot more standing over the games rather than, well, maybe not standing over the games, but it's going to have like an impact in player experience, right? So my thought here is that if faction play is important, then it is going to provide this feeling of verisimilitude, right? Like it's going to provide this feeling that everything kind of works together, that this is a living and breathing setting and world, and that the world itself kind of exists basically regardless of whatever the player characters or players, right? Things still are moving, still are shaping, right? So that I think having something like this going on makes it so that the players really feel the impact that they have on the world and setting, right? If you've got this constantly kind of developing and churning setting, whenever you make an impact on that, whenever you adjust or change the way that the world functions itself, I mean, you really feel like ownership over like what you've done and your impact in the game, right? I think, like, for instance, like the last Job Squad campaign, I think while it feels nice that, like, oh, this campaign went through, 8 sessions, and then by the end, the players had done something that is going to have an effect on the world. I think that's pretty cool. It's obviously like one way to do it, and one way to kind of give players this buy-in that they can actually, change and influence things in the setting. But a lot of that, unless I take those same players and down the line like run another campaign for them where they are directly feeling the effects of the decision they made, whether it's with the same characters or different characters, I think that's cool, but it feels, I don't know, for me, I feel like there's tiers of play, I guess, involved, and I don't know if I'm satisfied as a GM with it being like down the line, I really like the idea of it being right away, like an immediate impact. The next time we play, you feel what you did, right? So I guess that's kind of mostly said to kind of just clarify what I think factions are good for, where they're going to stand in the upcoming play, or upcoming campaign, and just kind of how they function, and just kind of, I don't know, ranting a little bit about what it is to be a player and have an impact on the game. So for this next round of campaigns, and I did say so in the announcement within the Discord, but basically this is for the players or the people of the community, right, who really want to kind of still influence the world as a player, but they can't commit to like the the weekly game, you know, they don't have the time for it, or maybe it just happens on a day that they're just not available, unfortunately. So don't have the time to kind of commit, or, you know, can't make it because it's, you know, it's on a day that doesn't work for their schedule. But they would still like to influence the world and the game itself as a player. For these people, I am basically including a, I don't know if I would call it like a secondary tier. I don't know how exactly I would have described this. Like maybe like a new type of participant, right? Like a new type of campaign participant. Maybe that's like the idea in regards to this, because I really don't have like the the vocabulary to kind of describe, or rather to name whatever this would be. So I think like the best way to do it, let's start just like putting some words on the page, would be to call these like patron or faction players. And so the goal of these players, right, because you're unable to involve yourself, you know, in the week-to-week game because of, like I said, various reasons. You can't make the day, or you don't have the time, right? Whatever. Or maybe you just might not be interested in old school essentials as a system, but you still want to kind of like be a contributing member of the community. Well, this is kind of going into that, right? So as a patron or faction player, you will run, or I don't know, yeah, you'll run what would be like NPCs, entire factions, etc., right? So, how does this work, right? That's where OE member comes into play. The moment has arrived. Yeah. Fair enough. How you doing, buddy? Yeah, so if somebody's not interested in the, you know, the actual like the actual game itself, because they're not interested in old school essentials or whatever else, they can still kind of involve themselves in the original Ekros member, or only Ekros members. Yeah, it would come into play. But basically you would run what would be NPCs, entire factions, or etc., right? So a patron or faction player is, I guess, mostly differentiated from like the actual session player or like the actual campaign player, by not actually taking, you know, part in the weekly adventures of the player characters, right? So you're not like actually in the week-to-week game. So you will run what would be NPCs, or an entire, like, you know, NPCs, either a single NPC who's powerful and having influence and trying to do something, or an entire faction. You'll play the goblin faction in the region, right? And so sorry, let me I had to cough. So and basically the way this works is you'll kind of set out your, you know, plan for your turn, which in this case maybe like even like a monthly turn, like, you know, like maybe you have like set out your plan for the month, right? And then through the week there'll just be like a few communications between you and me. So like, you know, like with like weekly updates, you know, and changes, right, depending on what your plan is and how it might function, right? In this case, you know, you'll have like regular income to kind of influence exactly like what decisions you make, because there'll be like, you know, costs associated with like building up a settlement, or, you know, stuff like that. Let's see. Ideally, these characters will be played kind of true to let's see. No, I was thinking, like, I had an idea that they would be held strictly to like a specific style of, like, a specific character type. So like if you drew the goblins, and I said like, well, these are extremely evil goblins, so everything you do has to be extremely evil. Or if I said, like, I don't know, I think it's probably better to just kind of let how the faction plays, kind of leave it into the hands of the player, because the character itself will be created, either completely, like, so completely, like, created in whole, or at least in part by the patron or faction player. We'll say by you, right? And yeah, so created in whole, or at least in part by you, maybe with like some light changes, depending on what the campaign needs, I guess, right? Like depending on when you come in as a patron player or a faction player, how that'll work, right? One thing to clarify is that players will be playing a specific faction only. They won't be playing like a domain. Like a player won't play the like domain or the quote unquote faction of an entire city, right? Like they can only play these characters rather than things like that. Rather than like owning a whole domain, which means like you own the guards, you're commanding like all of these, like almost like all these separate NPCs. I like the idea of like these monolithic figures or factions that these players play, rather than them having like direct control over like what happens in a specific village, in the sense of like what the leader would decide. Okay. Oh, so to be clear, like nobody will play, or actually maybe in this case it's not as bad. Actually, I'm gonna have to rethink this. Sorry. Forget what I said about not playing domains, because I'm essentially looking at like the small like tours, the small villages of Vogia, to kind of be more of their own faction rather than their own domain. So I guess the domain is like all of Vogia, so like nobody's gonna play like the high chief of Vogmaldir, right? I guess that's a better like explanation for what I mean when I say domain, right? I don't want somebody to play like the world leaders. I would rather them play like the smaller but capable of influencing the more local landscape, rather than like a like an entire like continental landscape. Okay. So you decide what your factions or NPC's goal is, right? So I won't be the one to decide what you do here. I'm not going to tell you like, hey, you're playing this character and your goal is to do this. I would rather you create a character, tell me, hey, this is the kind of character I want to play. I want to play the goblin chief of the I don't know Goblin Clan name generator. Let's see. Goblin Tribe name generator. Okay. Let's see what we get. Okay, I want to play the Goblin Chief of the Dread Moon Tribe, right? The Dread Moon Goblin Tribe. So if you decide that, right, what'll happen is you make this character. You decide what is the faction, what is the Dread Moon Goblin Tribe's goal, right? Or what is the chief of the Dread Moon Goblins tribe? You know, like these things can be separate, right? Like the faction, if you decide to play the faction rather than the NPC leader, then it could be, you know, the Dread Moon tribe is to just conquer the land, right? Slay all humans in the area, something like that. Whereas if you are playing specifically like the leader, well, maybe the leader has like a subversive goal. Like maybe the leader's goal is to summon, I don't know, like to complete this grand ritual that will summon, you know, some foul beast into the world, right? Or believes so. Even at the cost of the tribe itself, right? So like where those two things would differ, that's kind of how what it might be. But in any case, you decide what your factions or NPC. Oh, sorry, let me fix the screen. There we go. You decide what your factions or NPC's goal is, and then what else? Decide what your goals are. Let's see. And then yeah, so let me think. Sorry, I'm just considering what to put next because I'm not entirely sure. Exactly how to. I want to put it into words appropriately without kind of getting mixed up on that end. Okay, so you decide what your faction or NPC's goals are, and then yeah, and then kind of like as we said, through weekly updates, you decide each action and move, right? So yeah, that's kind of like the overarching view. One thing to say about this, and maybe I don't know, I'm not entirely sure if I should write it because I think maybe there's a bit of assumption here, is that like people will know what this means. So I guess to be clear, right, like maybe I should put some examples, right, of like yeah, maybe I should put like examples, and then yeah, like maybe some examples of the type of stuff that you can do as a patron or faction player, right? Like you can decide that your faction wants to build up a wall around their settlement, right? Or spy into the local area, right? Or we'll say, actually we'll do scout the local area, You know, I don't know, what's some other stuff? Tame the local wildlife, or tame the local fauna and flora. To use, we'll say tame the local fauna and flora, right? Like, so in this instance, if the land that your faction, you know, what if it has like a number of beasties, you know, and so the tribe, the Dread Moon Goblin tribe, can tame the local, I don't know, some local fauna, and they, you know, and it kind of adds some flavor to, you know, the scouts ride on, you know, the scout goblins ride out onto, like, you know, scouting. They don't ride horses, they ride, you know, like this other beastie that, you know, they ride wolves, right? Stuff like that. Let's see. Scout the local area, you know, spy into the local settlements, you know, assassinate local leaders. I think that's you know, all of these decisions can be very open, right? Because it's not meant to necessarily be codified in the sense of like, well, I want to do exactly this, or like, this is the list of things you can do. I would rather it comes directly from the player's own creativity to kind of bash this stuff together in a way that is enjoyable, and also interesting, right? So, whoops, what's going on? All right, sorry about that. Mistakenly clicked too many buttons. Okay. So, with all of that, sorry, I got my cat walking around going wild. Jesus. Okay. I think that's a solid kind of idea for what you might expect as kind of like a patron or faction player, right? It's like a decent, you know, decent sort of thing you could be doing. Okay. So, I guess the second part of this should be, let me think, adding, like, what's the point, right? That might be like a solid talking thing, or talking point. Like, what's the point of playing like this, right? Like, what does this matter? How can this maybe another way, like, what's the point, or like slash how, like, how do I win, right? Because if you're playing, like, you obviously want to do something, right? It's not just for the sake of, you know, just making random decisions. So what's the point? Or I guess the easier question is, how do I win? Your faction, your faction just needs to complete its objective, right? That's it. You know, whatever thing you're going after, whatever like big goal that you're going after, just needs to happen. Now these can be big goals, it can be a small goal, really. You know, maybe you need to screw over another faction to make sure this happens, right? Yeah. Yeah. Actually, one thing to add over here is like to ally with separate factions, stuff like that. Right. So what's the goal? Just need to complete the objective. Right. Depending on the size of the task, obviously either easier or harder, right? No way of exactly telling. And I guess to clarify, this doesn't mean that there can be only one, winner, so to speak, right? I guess how do I win is the kind of thing we put in quotes, right? Doesn't mean there can be only one winner, right? It doesn't mean that just because you complete your objective, that you're, for by any means that you're done or anything along those lines. You can come up with the next goal, right? But basically, that's the idea, in a sense. So, let me see what else. I guess to better answer, like, what's the point, right? And what is the purpose of like this patron and faction play? So the point of this is the patron or faction player is meant to be a source of constant change within the setting and campaign, right? No matter what the goal of a patron player or a faction player is, whether it's all types of things like amassing wealth, becoming like a political power player, right? Like no matter the decisions or goals, you will change the setting, and your actions will have consequences that are felt throughout the campaign and world setting. This is like a big way to kind of leave your mark directly as we play. Yeah, basically it's a way, for you, right, to create, to create I don't know, like moments, I guess, right, within the campaign that I can use to develop the campaign, regardless of whether or not it directly affects the in-campaign players, right? And I guess to kind of go back up to like the patron and faction player stuff, to kind of add something new to this, right? Deciding what the goals are, right? Think of this as kind of playing in a more while the actual players in the campaigns are playing like a burping, sorry. While the actual players of the campaign are having to kind of deal with things on would it be yeah, I guess like while the actual players are dealing with stuff on a more micro scale, the faction players, or patron players, I guess we call them, I don't know, are able to involve themselves in a more like macro sense, right? Like a more strategic sense, right? Like, so played more strategically rather than yeah, I guess just like played more strategically with decision make. I don't know. We'll say just played more strategic. I don't know. You kind of have like an overarching view of things, right? And to be said, you're not necessarily playing this like knowing everything. There's still like a fog of war, right? There's still things you won't know. Like you know, if you want to know what's in the area, you have to scout the local area, right? If you don't do that, you don't know what's going on, right? You're never gonna know what's going on. So it's kind of like playing maybe a bit more of like a strategy game, except yeah. In any case, yeah. There is no limit to your ambition or creativity. So no matter what you want to do, like you can push things to their absolute limit, right? This is these next game is meant to be like a sandbox campaign, right? So you have plenty of space for you. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's kind of like a decent breakdown on why I think faction play can be really fun. And what's up, buddy? So no, I'm just giving like a breakdown on. So I've decided to call so for the people, kind of like I said in the announcement, right? So for the people who can't commit to the weekly game, either that's because they, you know, whatever day I'm available to run it, they're not able to make. Yeah, I'm having a breakdown. Yeah. I'm losing it. No. But for the people who can't commit to the weekly game because it's, you know, maybe it's on a bad day for them, or they just, you know, they just do not have the time, but they would still like to influence the campaign and the world itself as a player. Kind of going through I don't really have a name for it just yet. I've called it like patron or faction player, right? And kind of detailing like what it means to be, right? What you'll be doing, right? So you'll run what would be NPCs or an entire faction, right? The way you do this is to kind of set out a plan for the month, right? With weekly updates and changes. You get, you know, you'll have income every month that kind of tells you like, all right, you got, you know, 500 gold. What are you going to do with that, right? Well, it's going to cost this, whatever. You can ally with separate factions. And whatever this will be created by you directly, you know, as a patron or faction player. You decide what your goals are. This is played a bit more strategically. And then through the weeks, you know, through the weekly updates, you know, you decide each action, right? And you know, move from there. So examples of this would be stuff like, you know, deciding that your faction wants to build up a wall around the settlement, scouting the local area, taming the local fauna and flora, maybe for, you know, war reasons or maybe for other reasons, spying into the local settlements, assassinating local leaders, stuff like that. You know, maybe you don't like what the campaign players are doing, right? Maybe they're against you. Still doing the contact listening. Yep. Absolutely. And then after kind of describing like what a faction player does, I think we'll just decide it faction players, right? We'll just call them faction players. This patron kind of sounds a little weird. We'll call it faction play. Yeah, let's kill him. Exactly. And then just kind of like describing like why do I think this is important? Why do I think this might be fun, right? You know, so how do you win, right? You just need to complete your objective, right? And this doesn't mean that there can be only one winner. And then like, what's the point, right? I think that a faction player can have huge influence on the campaign, because they're kind of meant to be like this source of constant change within the setting, and kind of it's almost kind of played in like a bit of more of like a Bronstein kind of overarching type of play, right? And we're still going to keep the idea of like the weekly update. So like what happens in the local area, we'll do like a Wargaming Wednesday report sort of thing. And that'll be like the stuff that happens overarching, you know, that everybody would know. So stuff like that. And yeah, I think it'd be cool, right? I don't know what that is. I feel like Ram. Bronstein is like the super old school, like you kind of just play by saying like what you're doing, rather than there being like, okay, we need a ton of like, I guess to say that this isn't something that's super codified, right? You just tell me what you want to do, and we'll figure out a way, like, okay, like, you know, to kind of make that decision between us. But yeah, a faction player is meant to kind of be like a source of constant change within the setting and campaign. Like no matter what the decisions, you'll change the setting and your actions will have consequences that are felt throughout the campaign and world setting. And it's a way for you to kind of create moments within the campaign that I can use to kind of continue to develop the game, right? Whether or not it directly affects the players. And yeah, there's no limit to your ambition or creativity. One thing I like about this idea is that if, like, imagine, depending on like what the players are deciding to do, they are not sure if they're actually interacting with like a real person or an NPC that I just kind of created and put into the campaign, right? They might be interacting with like a real member of the Discord, and you won't know until, you know, until that information comes out, right? Like for whatever reason or however that might be. I really like that idea. Like, so, you know, the local goblin troop that attacked the settlement that you're staying in, right? Was that a decision made by another person in the Discord? Or was that just me kind of throwing some stuff into the world? It creates this like real churning effect where the world feels very real. The verisimilitude is just very on point, I think. And yeah, I think it'll be, you know, very fun, right? You get your own, you know, as a faction player, you get your own unique and kind of creative response to what is happening in the game. There's gonna be all these random events kind of happening around you, you know, and you're like, you kind of have to react to them as you do. And then we're playing with the one-to-one downtime, which we'll kind of get into and how that works. And so yeah, I think that, I don't know, I just think I think this is like the way to kind of really make this setting feel like it's genuinely moving almost. So yeah, right. So yeah, definitely give it a go. Yeah, I think then the next, let's see, the next topic, because I feel like this one, yeah, I feel like we've squeezed the juice from this one. So we'll go into heading and we'll do one-to-one downtime pacing. Okay. So this is a bit more. Man, is there a way I can insert? I think you can insert like a table. Let's see, to-do list, a table. Okay, this might work. we got like 5 days a week, etc. Okay. Downtime pacing. Sorry if you can hear my cat going crazy in the background. It might sound like a wild beast in its own. Okay. So, to kind of describe, what is downtime pacing? So before we get into the table stuff, let's get into the other stuff, right? So, calm down. Yeah. Yeah, let me take a breather. So what downtime pacing is, it is a strict timekeeping. So we'll say strict, uniform timekeeping method tied to the real world calendar. And let's see. So, okay. Right. So, strict uniform timekeeping method tied to the real world calendar, and maybe there's nothing else, right? Just tied to the real world calendar. That's what downtime pacing is, right? Now, why does it matter? Yeah. Or why do I think it's important? Maybe for this next round of campaigns, stuff like that. Well, if we at least we don't always end up playing sessions on the same Ekros day, although this means that you need to consider rest days for NPCs when adventurers are in town. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is, I think, okay, maybe it is worth going into this. Actually, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to actually use this table the way I should. So maybe we can maybe we can do 3, why and how, right? Yeah, it's never come up so far. Exactly. This is like this is yeah. So I guess what are the pros and cons of this, right? What does it matter? All that stuff. So okay. Yeah, it's never come up so far. Yeah, we have a calendar, but we never use it, and it never really matters. And yeah, its sessions aren't on the same single day, or a whole campaign is not tied to just a couple of days in a row. With players going from level 1 to, I mean, they're with the way this is played, I mean, there are some people who play modern D&D. They'll play a level 1 to level 10, 12 campaign, and if you're actually tracking what's really happening in the setting, it's it would be over 2 weeks, right? Yeah, level up montage style, right? It's tough. So what I think this does is it brings in a more, how would I say it, right? for the instance, I'm trying to think of, say it with a Dutch accent. Yeah. I'm really trying to think about this. So you know, okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I had to like figure out the way I'd best be able to kind of describe this stuff. So essentially, I think that this one-to-one style offers an opportunity to it kind of completely changes the way a campaign feels, right? Now the days in between, say it with interpretive dance, thank you. Now for like the days in between sessions, they kind of matter, right? You have to like decide, hey, I'm gonna be doing this, you know, what's going on. So I don't know, maybe I don't know if I should like write this down or if this should be like a video that I make or something, like because it's quite a bit to unpack. So I guess to kind of, I guess let's simplify this a little bit. You know, for every day that passes, in the real world, a day passes within the setting. What this means is that sessions need to be focused and with a goal for the day in mind. Right? Because something a lot of people will say is like, well, you know, a common thing that people say, you know, is well, like it's almost like a joke, right? Like people will say, well, like one-to-one doesn't work because, you know, you have to play it like like, okay, every day passes, but then like in the campaign, right, like are we like, as we play, you know, are we playing literally minute for minute, and like only something can happen, right? Like time flows time flows at whatever pace is needed for a fun session, right? And even in this situation, because we know that we have 7 days between this session and the next, we can take a loan out on the next couple of days, right? So it doesn't have to be the case that this one session that we run, what's up, Matt? I'm trying to explain what downtime pacing is. That this one session we run can only be done, you know, like in this one, like it can only be in the one day that you're playing. This is a very common misconception, right? Essentially, you can take a loan out as a player on the future days that you have in front of you, right? So we can continue to play. You say, okay, we get somewhere, we're gonna rest. Boom, we're gonna get into the next day. And this just means that whenever we update the calendar afterwards, right? So for instance, if the game is on Monday, and to actually complete the goal at hand in the campaign appropriately, and needs like a rest and all that stuff, we're gonna need 2 more days. Well then, boom, for the next 2 days, your actions are already decided as these characters, and so we get to the next 2 days, and then we get to continue the story. You essentially have 7 days worth of time to kind of borrow from, that you kind of lose out on the downtime a little bit, because you're deciding to use that time in active play, but you know, it catches back up on the other end, right? So like once the session ends, you know, we say, okay, we're ending on this day, so, you know, boom, boom, boom. Then over the course of these past 3 days, you've done this session. What do you want to do with the rest of your downtime, right? Like, what are you going to do with the next, say you use 3 days, what are you going to do with the next 4 days until we get to Monday, like next Monday? Yeah. So a lot of people get caught up in this idea that, because it's one-to-one downtime, like, you know, we can never fast forward a little bit, right? Which is like the furthest thing from the truth. It's just this this hyper misconception from people. And yeah. So, for instance, ideally though, like, to get the most out of the downtime, you kind of want to be like focused with a goal for the day in mind, because when we end session, I don't think we're gonna be able to end, or I'm really trying to, I have to think about how this is gonna this part is gonna function. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, what if we're directly in the middle of this one thing, like a goal, right? And it feels really weird to kind of like pull back and like, all right, you know, this the necromancer is, you know, raising an undead army. I didn't mean it. Distract them if you really want to. Yeah. How are we gonna handle these moments where like the player is going after, and after the necromancer, right? How do we deal with, you know, the fact that the session has to end, right? Do they just stop and then time continues as normal for the next week? I think that'll take some time. Obviously, it'll take some time to get kind of used to that. And I think it'll take time for the players to get used to that kind of stuff, like really focusing on what their intended goals are. And I think it kind of requires, yeah, it kind of requires a bit of, I guess, maybe finagling from me, in order to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't, yeah, leave the necromancer alone. He's working on some stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a good critique of one-to-one downtime, and how, you know, if you pause play in the middle of a session, in the middle of a moment, right? How it can really kind of mess with the overall arcing like storyline that's playing out. I have to think, to be honest, I really have to, like, this is something I have to definitely consider, right? How do we handle this? Maybe moments like this just come with the cost of a bit of a, yeah, just maybe like a bit of finagling with the calendar. I'm not entirely sure, but I do think that the benefits of it kind of outweigh this single kind of catching point that might be a bit weird, right? Like, for instance, if we talk about like the benefits, you know, it makes certain things feel much more real, right? The example vid you shared made me think that the downtime is probably going to need some session time to map out. There are decision points that need party input and possibly roles. Well, I think stuff like that can happen off screen, right? And through the Discord channels. Yeah, like I'll be keeping watch. Like if there's any specific roles from characters, which doesn't really come up that often with downtime type stuff, because again, like with OSC and with BECME in general, there's a ton of stuff that isn't tied to like a role. Like if you you know, do some, like for instance, if you're like prepping for a heist and you need to go kind of scout out the area, right? Then you just do that. If you spend downtime doing it, you just do it, right? Rather than it being like, well, roll for stealth. Okay, now roll for perception. Okay, now roll, you know, like these things. It'll just be like, okay, you went and did this. Here's the information that you earn from doing that, right? You learn that the guards work in a 1 hour rotation. Every, you know, hour on the hour, a new face is, you know, switched to the front of the gate or something like that, right? So it's not tied too much into like rolling for every single fucking activity that you want to do. You know, you kind of move away from that. In a sense, in that sense, it's a bit more, yeah. The trade-off for it not having to be a gamble is that it costs time. Exactly, right? And it makes this stuff feel real. Like if you think about like heists in most D&D campaigns, they get the information that morning and then they complete it within the next couple of hours. Yes, that can happen, right? It's not an impossible thing. But if we really look at like a heist, you know, especially if it's like dangerous, there's a lot of stuff going on. The lethality of old school essentials and really just like the older style of play is going to make it so that you actually have to kind of plan something out much smarter than the modern D&D or, you know, Pathfinder, or really like any type of more modern tactical game, tactical like role-playing game, is just run face first at it, right? Smash through it because you have the combat proficiency. And of course I haven't dealt the deck in my favor and not yours, right? So that's a big part of it. So some of the benefits is that these I guess activities feel more real and consequential. Yeah, and the next week my PC will take over the kingdom using no other raw. That's good for 6 days. Yeah, right. Like, you know, so much stuff happens in D&D games, which it's very like superhero stuff, and that's cool, right? I'm not criticizing that stuff because obviously I ran 5th edition and I ran Pathfinder 2nd edition. I don't dislike those systems, right? I'm not like giving up on. Well, I do dislike 5th edition, but I'm not like giving up on Pathfinder 2nd edition forever, right? I just need a break. I need to like jump into something else that offers a different style of game. Because that style of game and those style of campaigns that are very character focused are just like a creative draw on me right now, right? I just need like a bit of reset time, and then, you know, I'm probably gonna jump right back in, right? Because I love running character focused types of campaigns. Is this an extension of that mail system RPG idea? Yeah, exactly. Well, the upper point, I think you might have missed it. But when we were talking about like faction play, that's exactly what I meant. Like it's, let me see if I can go up. Basically, like you run what this NPC would be. Like if you can't play, yeah, it's more domain style, but it's definitely like a tier below domain, right? Domain has like a lot more finagling kind of information stuff required. Whereas faction play is definitely is like fast play, right? It's like domain on fast mode, right? You tell me like, okay, for the next month, you know, we're gonna be doing like, this is what my character's gonna be doing, and we're gonna do like the weekly updates, you know, we're gonna take a lot of the ideas that we had with Callisto, and just kind of reformat them so that they actually affect the campaign as it plays. And the reason that we can do that, the reason that I can put agency back into the faction play only uses downtime actions, but on a level higher than single adventure. Yeah, exactly. Like you have a group at your command, so you're almost like you're playing multiple PCs, except you're just kind of sending them out to do things in the world. And the reason I can do that, so one thing I really disliked about Callisto was that the way Callisto was meant to be played was the players were supposed to have a level of control over what happened as you played. We were basically like stripping the fun part of why you would play Callisto in the first place, stripping it down, and I think this music is a little loud, but stripping it away, and basically, because I didn't want the players to have too much power to decide, you know, maybe super important things in the world, we were trying to like, it was almost like it was almost like trying to 5e Callisto, remove the stuff we don't like, make these systems to kind of build on top of, you know, like to build on top of like the frame of what is Callisto. Like I was trying to, it just felt so stupid. Like I don't know why it didn't occur to me directly. I think maybe because the goal was like, oh yeah, we'll do Callisto, we'll just change a few things. But the more I kept looking at it, the more I realized like I'm just like I'm taking the idea of what this game is, removing the way you're supposed to play it, trying to insert my own way of playing it, and then calling it Callisto. It just felt so fucking dumb. And part of the reason why, yeah, exactly. So every 5e game, exactly. I was trying to like 5e like a political intrigue game, which feels so fucking dumb. Because the point of Callisto is that the players decide what happens, right? Like you have control over what happens in this area. If you're the like, I think the example that the Callisto PDF gives, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I can like pull it up really quick if I have it. It gives this idea that, or it gives an example that, like, as a player, you decide, you know, you're the military guy, so you decide the outcomes of all the military actions that happen in this region. So that's why the political game was fun, because you had to gain favor from this guy, so that you know, I had to gain favor with Mats, so that Mats would vote in my favor whenever I have a combat scenario in the region that he controls. And so that felt very, like, it felt, removing that, you remove the game itself, right? That's what, yeah, that's what the game is about. Why the fuck are we removing that? And I was also worried that, like, having the players have way too much power over the setting itself in that way would cause for like some ridiculous like shenanigans where shit just changes like way too fast and everything doesn't feel, you know, like nothing makes sense because everything is changing like on the dot, right? So what one-to-one downtime pacing does, it actually empowers, right? You know, we'll say like it empowers players to actually, we'll say it empowers, you know, all players, yeah, all players to have a more realistic and, we'll say influence on the world or on the setting, right? I don't have to worry about, you know, like one player saying I go to war with the capital and then the other player saying they win, right? Like I don't have to trust that everybody is on the same page, because it just plays out way cooler, right? This way, because we actually have time. Like, you know, we actually have, like, it makes sense. You know, it'll take 6 months to run a military campaign. You know, you have to live for 6 months. The players don't have to, you know, like, there's so much stuff that has to come into it that, like, okay, like it makes a lot more sense. yeah, so activities feel more real and kind of consequential, right? Like it takes actual time to set up the heist. It takes actual time to kind of spy the local area. You know, it takes actual time for bandits and armies and tribes and nomads to kind of move around the map. Yeah. So, for downtime as a priority 4, Shad will spread a rumor of a rare bird, which is actually a type of vulture. Exactly, right? And then, like, you know, we so that actually, you know, like, it actually takes a few days to seed a rumor, right? Like, I just think the benefits of downtime pacing outweigh the potential sticking points for most people. And I think people tend to have an idea that actually take you seriously. All right, I did. Yeah. Yeah, we want well, actually we'll be in this area for the next campaign, so all right. I guess, okay. Most people will say, like, you know, like, this type of pacing only works if you play this one way, right? Like that's how most people kind of address like one-to-one downtime. It's only going to work if you play this one way. Whereas the idea should rather be that we're using one-to-one pacing specifically to play this one way, right? So it kind of changes the idea of like where this stuff kind of sits, I guess, right? So you're still having planning arcs for a specific number of sessions, or it's a more open-ended approach? This will definitely be a bit more open-ended, because I don't want to put like a specific, like, you know, number of sessions on it, because to be honest, like, this is my, I think I've played one-to-one downtime pacing. The last time I played a game with this style was so long ago that I can only draw from like nostalgia and memory. So I'm not entirely, you know, not entirely sure, right? A bit more open-ended, right? Maybe the campaign, like, maybe the way campaigns will work is that like the initial group will get together and like we'll decide like, okay, what is the goal of this group's, you know, what does this group like want to accomplish? What does this faction want to accomplish? What do you want to do, right? And that might be like, we want to, you know, delve enough dungeon to retire as wealthy adventurers. Okay, you know, it'll take this much gold to do blah 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 blah, right? And then we just kind of play until that happens, right? Or play until there's a TBK, and then maybe something else has to work. But the goal here is to kind of make it so that it seems like you can almost approach some of it through play by post. Absolutely, right? Absolutely. That's kind of the point with some of the faction play stuff, right? Like the faction play stuff is almost, you know, exclusively like play by post. It's basically like you telling me like, hey, here's my plans for my faction or my group or my character for the next month, right? These are the things I'd like to accomplish, you know, and then on a weekly basis we kind of like play by post, basically. That's for the more faction stuff. For the player stuff, like the actual direct campaign player stuff, we kind of have to see, right? What I think is, yeah, there are butt shark farms. Yeah, getting a group to decide on direction, 5 directions from a group of 4. Yeah, yeah. Essentially, what I think is, yeah, like the structure of this kind of encourages the opportunity to kind of participate in a bunch of activities between sessions, right? Like training your character, you know, shopping for special items, trading, spying, scouting, right? Stuff like this can typically kind of take away so much session time, right? If we run a session and you know we're going out into the wild, and the vast majority of the session is spent like rolling to see what happens, to see what you find, like I feel like sometimes maybe that stuff kind of gets a bit tedious, right? Like especially like going shopping, you know, like a lot of people that I know at least kind of just hand wave shopping, or they say like, tell me what you want to buy and then we'll do that. There are definitely some like role play heavy crowds that really love like actually role playing out a shopping session, but man, like maybe I'm just too old, you know, like I didn't like, that's the worst part about it, right? Like I just do not want to sit here and listen to you like play pretend shopkeeper, right? Like fuck, man. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah. Let me think. What else? Yeah. Yeah, I've had a player that really wanted to do that. I just direct him to the table and tell me what you want when you get. Yeah, exactly. Because it's yeah. Yeah. It I would much prefer like just actively doing some crazy shit every session each time. Yeah. And I know I've said like multiple times. Yeah, I hate shopping in real life, right? I'm not going to direct fantasy shopping. Exactly. Right? You know, if I go to a store, the one thing I want to do at the store is get out the fastest, right? I'm not like a grazing shopper. I'm not like the kind of like walk around, oh what's this, oh what's that, you know, like just slowly discover what's at a store, right? Like I just want to get what I need. I want to plan what I want to get, go there, get it, and leave as soon as possible. So yeah. One thing as well is that I think with the way the character driven campaigns have gone, and maybe this is like a me thing, and maybe this is like me just getting in my own way when it comes to this kind of stuff. I hate peril in real life, but I like to pretend it. Yeah. So sorry, I was going on a tangent and then I fucking read I hate peril. But another part of like the one-to-one campaign, downtime pacing and stuff, counter to character-driven campaigns. So like a player-driven campaign rather than a character-driven campaign, right? I think a player-driven campaign, I think, is a much more group creative endeavor, right? Where everything that happens is completely emergent, or emerges based on the choices made by all the players in the game and their response to random events that happen, which are crafted by other players in the game, right? Like all this stuff kind of feeds into itself as like a cycle. And instead of this when I say this, I'm not like disparaging any of the players that I've had, obviously, so I hope it's not taken the wrong way, but it removes the burden of campaign kind of plot creation off of only the GM's shoulders, or it removes a huge percentage of that, right? I feel like in a player-driven campaign, I mean, everybody bears the burden of the story, you know, like quote unquote. Everybody has a equal amount of burden, or, you know, weight on their shoulders in regards to what actually happens in the game, because you have to make decisions. And the game only happens if you make decisions, right? If you choose to interact with what's going on, if you choose to do something, whatever you choose to do, instead of a more kind of character or narrative driven game where, you know, you're set up in this plot, in this scenario where, you know, the group has been brought together to like, I don't know, let me throw out like a thing to escort the you know, the high clerics of whatever, right? Instead of looking at the tree thing and running away. No, actually I think like the past couple of sessions on the Monday game have actually been a bit more in line with like the way it should be going. Or the way I would like it to be going. But essentially, instead of it being like, you know, here's the conceit of the campaign, right? You're all playing paladins, there's an undead thing happening, you all have to deal with the undead menace, and the first session is all of you getting together with this very narrative kind of this narrative binding, you know, situation where as a player you feel like the only way to progress is to push forward the initial narrative given to you in session 1, right? Like for instance, like even though it had some really great moments that were decided by character play, the campaign with Isaac Cooperson, right? You're all at a parade and an assassination attempt happens. Okay, you deal with the assassination attempt. Okay, then this group shows up by consequence of the assassination attempt. Okay, what's the next thing to do? We should approach that group and talk to them. Okay, they kind of, you know, A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, you know, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, until we get to the end of the story. And along that line, there are some decisions made, but for the most part, everything kind of carries this this narrative string that kind of leads from one into the next, and it feels very weird as a player to be like, not doing that, we're actually just going to do something that is completely different to the idea of what this campaign was going to be in the first place. I think it is very hard for players to, even if the GM has told them, like, hey, this is player driven, you can do whatever you want, right? This is player driven, you can do what you want in the game, I'm not going to stop you, but I will have like some sort of story going, right? Even if a GM tells you what you have available to you, it still feels very weird to kind of just like cut, you know, the line on the main, or, you know, what is perceived to be the main narrative story and just do something else, right? It feels very weird to kind of not go along with that. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe it feels like you'll be fucking the GM over even if they told you like, hey, don't worry about it, you know. There's just this sense to kind of go along, I guess, right? This and I think so the downtime being based on an individual's wants opens up new paths. Exactly, yeah. Like all sorts of, you know, adventure hooks, all sorts of things happen based on what you do, and then you follow that, you know. And it doesn't require me, you know, coming up with it and presenting it to you in a timely fashion where maybe you can choose to do this or choose to do that, or, you know, etc., etc. And so I just think Yeah. I think downtime, like one-to-one pacing like this, just solves so many problems and creates so many opportunities for both players and for individuals. That I think most people aren't even like aware of it until they start to play it, and then they realize like, holy fuck, like all of this is happening because of the choices that all of us involved are making, including the people who are playing factions, rather than being an in-session, you know, week-to-week character. So yeah, I think I can't do it here because I just don't even know what tools I would use to kind of just try this out. Like, do I even have like fucking Paint or something? Do I have Paint? I have Paint. I have Paint as an app. Yeah, this might work better as a this might work better as a video. Maybe I'll make a video on this and just keep it in the Discord, like saved somewhere. Because I'm thinking like, here, I'm gonna show you how to do this. This is but yeah, I guess I'll save that for a YouTube video, which might be, you know, real fun. Right. So put the vid on my YouTube. Yeah. Considering the character creation is going to be so quick, it's going to be juxtaposed against some thought into character motivation and goals with an idea of how to attain them. Yeah, and that is why I think, at least with this first round of campaign, or at least this first kind of foray into this playstyle, that from the beginning, the players involved in the campaign itself have this one, at least, connecting factor where everybody is a member of a faction. You know, like you're all or you're all like trying to build your own faction, right? You're trying to, you know, the order of the, you know, of the Gilded Fist or something, right? I don't know. Like you're trying to have like your own influence in the game. I think that'll need to be like from session 0, that'll be something that's decided. Because I mean, to be honest, I don't know if you can even approach a game like this with the idea that you're not already like pretty well connected. You know, backstory and stuff should be real light. You know, the story is what we play, not what, you know, what has happened already. Yeah, and I guess like the lethality and stuff like that, it's, yeah. The hand over the brassy knob. There you go, dude. Exactly. The hand of the brassy knob. There you go. But yeah, sorry. We lost of the, yes. Well, I lost my own mind there for a second. I was like drifting into space, you know, at a speed faster than light. Yeah, so I think this might work well as a, or yeah, I'll make this like a YouTube video. This will be what I work on this week. I'm gonna try to get it out this week. Right. What is next? I mean, I feel like I've said basically everything I can say without like writing it all out, because I'd basically just be like writing a fucking script, right? That feels weird. Yeah. Let's see. Right. So I've gone down the rabbit hole of what one-to-one downtime pacing is. how it's played, etc. Yeah. We've already gone over like what faction players will be doing. And so what last thing was world building? Fuck, man. I don't even know if I don't know if I got the brain for world building. We might have to save that one for Friday. Oh, I guess while I'm here, yeah, maybe there is like some world building stuff I can set into place. So, I'm putting this in a question mark. So an idea that I had recently, there are no gods in Ekros, right? That's, I never wanted, you know, gods, whether they be, you know, like, even if they were played out of sight, out of mind, like, yes, they exist, but they have no influence on the world. I never wanted that to be a thing, in the setting, and I never wanted it to be, and I definitely never wanted it to be that, yes, they're real and they also influence the setting, right? I've never really wanted that either. But what I think is kind of missing, and I think I can justify it in the setting itself, in like how Ekros would function, is like these, maybe like these worship, maybe like religious style order, like maybe like religious / like worship style orders. Since we do have, you know, like kind of quote unquote demigods, right? We have the Solemns, which are these immense, like, you know, sometimes they're these immensely powerful beings, that almost kind of somewhat, I mean, they're mortal, but they almost somewhat fit the bill for what, you know, might be worshipped or followed. So yeah, I've had this idea that, like, you know, sure, there's no gods, right? But wouldn't it be interesting to kind of have, yeah, like these belief groups, right? Like one that sprung to mind was like a solemn that used to exist that would have had, like, you know, like solemn exists, you know, that like preaches, I don't know, like honor, we'll just say like that preaches lawful good behavior, right? That preaches lawful good behavior, and very influential, right? Like, you know, gains the attention of the masses, right? Now let's say that Solemn dies, right? Like Solemn dies, and there was, you know, this, you know, the order of the solemn whatever, the Solemn's vow, I don't know, right? Whatever you want to call it. For instance, like with the faction stuff, that we were kind of getting into, but then we kind of, like the free companies and the faction stuff, we had the, fuck, let me just pull it up really quick. Let's see. The Winter's Own, right? So going back to world updates, so yeah, like the Winter's Own persists, right? The Winter's Own is like the faction that follows this specific solemn, and this solemn kind of gives them, you know, benefit. Because the solemn that lived was so righteous and had such good behavior, the company continues to go, right? Like, you know, just because the solemn died, the idea still like remains, right? And it's still very influential, right? Still kind of continues on. So I don't know. I don't know if, I guess like people who like the setting, I don't know, like for some people I know, like the fact that there is no gods is kind of like a positive thing. And I'm wondering if specifically this is why, because there's not like these religious or these belief groups that are always like trying to, you know, follow the word of da 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 da, and you too will be saved, right? Like, but I think it makes sense though, right? Like at the very least, I think it is plausible to the point of believability, right? Because like Volgians already have the idea of the, yeah, it's like a human nature thing. Yeah, the Volgians already have the idea of the what is the word? The bridge of swords, right? For you to pass over into whatever comes next, or whatever belief that is. That you cross the bridge of swords. And yeah, I think especially with how factions are going to work in the next round of campaigns, having like a bunch of factions would be very fun, right? Like I think it just adds more flavor, and the fact that like people are going to make their own factions anyways, like if people sign up, I don't know, maybe nobody signs up and the whole idea is like completely a failure and I'm a fucking loser, but I don't know. I think it could be fun. In any case, I think there is room for these like religious worship belief groups, right? You know, let me add belief to belief style order. Like maybe there's a solemn with them, maybe there's not, right? Who knows? But I think that could be very cool, and I think like a person playing the solemn, right? That could be extremely cool. A person actually playing like an in-setting solemn and making decisions on like what their factions are doing, right? Deify the powerful dead NPCs. Yeah, right? Like canonized and up. Yeah, like Rune, right? I could still, you know, yeah. Tubby. Who's Tubby? Who is Tubby a reference to? Oh, Tibby. Tiberius Ward. Yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah. Isaac Cooperson, right? Like we've kind of already progressed the fact that there is like a rising kind of faction because of like the Isaac Cooperson stuff, right? We've already got like, you know, Tiberius Ward, who's now maybe people have like started to follow this Death Knight. Rune, right? We already have this great leader of orcs. So now they're being like a faction of orcs that have kind of split off from the main, you know, this faction of orcs is split off from the domain of Uruk. Right? Yeah, I think it works. And I think maybe that'll be what Friday is about. Like, you know, creating new factions and belief groups based on NPCs or whatever. Demon of Tobacco Staining. Yeah. Well, Eric is already like a faction NPC. Like Eric already would be a faction. He is the leader of the Company of the Thorn, right? So that would, like, for instance, if Ram wasn't able to play as a week-to-week player but wanted to kind of stick around and have some influence, he could definitely be making decisions on what, you know, Eric is doing. So. Right. Okay. Well, I think that's about it. I'd like to have him killed off. Okay. Yeah, well, then, you know, you got to do it as a player. But I think that's about it. We'll hold out the world building stuff. That's my downtime activity. Yeah, yeah. There you go, dude. Yeah. And my downtime activity, I think, is going to be making a video on one-to-one downtime activity and the benefits of it, what it does, how you run it, etc., etc. So yeah, thanks for coming to my TED talk, you know, but yeah, I think that's we'll probably wrap it up here. So thank you all for hanging out. Definitely enjoyed. Appreciate you two especially, right? For hanging out in chat, kind of throwing out messages to kind of keep the juices flowing. Yeah, and I think like a video on this kind of works, because I looked it up and I did find a video, but as Chris said, as Sniper said, it's maybe it doesn't do the greatest job at explaining it, so maybe like a new video kind of helps a bit better. So okay, yeah, I'll definitely be working on that and like to get that out either by this weekend or by the start of next week. Yeah, I think that's my big goal, is to get that video done. So we'll be back on Friday to do a little bit of world building streaming. But other than that, thank you all for hanging out. Hope you have a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Appreciate you being around, and maybe we'll see you on Friday. If not, see you when we see you. Hope you all have a good one, and yeah, so peace guys, later.